the Final Fantasy franchise on Steam Deck, at least most of it. So we got Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 Rebirth, 7 Remake Intergrade, 7 Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy XII, the Zodiac Age, Final Fantasy XIII, Final Fantasy XIV, 15, 16, 10, and Lightning Returns. So there's a lot of Final Fantasy games out there. These are not all of them because this video would be endless. When it comes to exceptions, Final Fantasy XI is an MMORPG. I think it's online, and unfortunately it's not on Steam in my region. You can honestly find them basically on any digital store. And now that I mentioned storefronts, thanks to the sponsor Instant Gaming, you can find cheaper games for PC, PlayStation, Xbox and Nintendo Switch. Little Nightmares 3 is $34.71 US, releases on October 9th. And many other games that I highly recommend, like Expedition 33, GTA 5, Ready or Not, and Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut. And when it comes to the Final Fantasy franchise, you can also find them at a discounted price. Rebirth for $40.71, Final Fantasy IX for $8.23. With this partnership, we're giving away a free game to one of you guys each month. To enter the giveaway, hit participate on the link in the description. So thanks again to Instant Gaming for sponsoring this video. Let's continue. Alright, so when it comes to the first 6 games, we're going to be using the same settings, display settings on windowed 800p, so native resolution. So the first one to the sixth one are actually the Pixel Remaster versions, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on all of them. They're all locked to 60 FPS, so my advice on the OLED at least is to lock it to 60 Hz in this menu. So when it comes to battery life on this one, there's not really much to talk about. Over 6 hours easily, at least on the OLED Steam Deck. Here we got Final Fantasy II, and same as before, over 6 hours of battery easily. And when it comes to visuals, it looks pretty sharp on the OLED. And there's not much to show on this one either, so let's jump into the third one. And here you go. Also, I gotta give them props that the UI is super sharp. So it clearly worked pretty damn well, at least when it comes to the PC versions of this. Okay, we attack all this. But again, if you're looking at it, this is basically the same as the first and second one, at least when it comes to visuals and performance, which is to be expected. And again, as you can see, probably, the theme will repeat itself from the previous ones, at least up to 6. Then on the 7th we jump into the 3D era. Again, it's working completely fine, frame times are consistent, not much really to show you. Same with the combat. Combat looks similar to this, but it's still 2D. Final Fantasy V, I'm not riding the Chocobo. Again, a reminder, make sure you are at 60 Hz if you're on an OLED Steam Deck. On the LCD, nothing to be done, it's all fine. Here we go, the environments look more complex, at least when it comes to the pixel art. So there we go, both are done. But again, I expect 6 hours of battery on this one, very little GPU and CPU. If you need more power, you can lock the TDP to something lower. In Final Fantasy VI, this is the last one in the Pixel Remaster, which again, long battery life, not really a lot to say about it. It works completely fine, not really nothing to worry about. The only thing that I notice is that 5 and 6 are not verified, they are marked as playable, and that's because some stuff requires you to manually invoke the Steam Deck's keyboard, holding the Steam key and hitting X. Usually is to just type your name for your character, and that's basically it. So yeah, when it comes to the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster, so 1 to 6, expect something like this, very long battery life. And in that very long battery life, you can suspend and resume the game whenever you want, which I think is ideal for a franchise like this. Very long playthroughs, just put the deck to sleep, get back, and you can pick up where you left off, which I think is the biggest selling point, at least in my opinion. Alright, so here we go, the first in the 3D era, Final Fantasy VII. So 800p, full screen, linear filtering, keep aspect ratio, and the original graphic mode, we're disabling that, so we want a little bit better graphics. So go to settings and change those, then hit play. Alright, so Final Fantasy VII, the original. As you can see, the pre-rendered environments and the 3D characters. And as you can probably notice now, 31 FPS. So yeah, the original unfortunately is locked to 31 when you're in this moment, and when you're into combat it's locked to 15. Unfortunately you cannot do anything about it, at least when it comes to the 15 FPS. That animation was kinda cool. In this case, what I would recommend is probably lossless scaling to do frame generation. It's a turn-based game, no big deal. You have 30 FPS in combat, and it might look weird, and you'll have input lag. But in a game like this, it's not a big deal, all things considered. So yeah, this is the original game. Of course, you can notice its limitations. It came out like 28 years ago. Let's call him Cloud, why not? That's basically it. When it comes to battery life, probably 5 hours, I'd say. One core is at 100%. So I'll probably limit the TDP to something much lower. But it works. You don't have to do any weird tweaks to make it work. So not much to say about it. It works just fine. Tentacle, that's suspicious. Pretty sus. Final Fantasy VIII Remastered, we go into the options, you can use your controller, which is good to see. 800p, you can select play. You can probably notice when it comes to dialogue, the subtitles are super high quality, which is good to see. But I wish they updated at least the textures. I mean the backgrounds, but also when you are traveling around, you have this low quality thing, which is clearly from the original. Some upscaling there, that's some user interface, would have been nice. Okay, here we go. Let's see combat. By the way, if you want to fix those frame times, you can open this side menu and lock it to 30 FPS. Here we go. Combat is about to happen. Wonderful. Let's see if it's locked to 15 FPS like Final Fantasy VII. It is. So again, in this case, I'll use frame generation if you have lossless scaling, so it at least looks smoother, because the animations were built at 15 FPS. That's probably why it is still locked to 15. Which I don't think is a big deal to use frame generation despite the input lag, because at least the game will look smoother. But the input lag in this case doesn't matter, because it's a turn-based game. You just choose from a list, like you're seeing that I'm doing right now, and it will look smoother. So this is one of the few exceptions where I would use frame gen, at least using lossless scaling. I'll be doing a separate video talking about that, which I will leave in the pinned comment once it's done. But I wish at least the background textures for the pre-rendered backgrounds were better, considering this is called Final Fantasy VIII Remastered. Once you launch Final Fantasy IX, you're going to be greeted with this launcher. Hold the Steam key, right trackpad so you can move around, and press on the trackpad to interact. Choose 800p. Window doesn't matter, just put it like that and hit play. Alright, so here we go, Final Fantasy IX. If I pause the game, there's no options on this one. Yep, this looks cool. But the pre-rendered background is also obvious. The thing is, it's not like the previous one. It's a little bit higher resolution on the backgrounds. But the 3D models look pretty cool, in my opinion. And here we go, combat. Please don't be locked at 15, please, please, please. Okay, it says 30 FPS, but it's clearly less than 30 FPS. And to hit OK, you need to use the trackpad, unfortunately. So it has its issues, but it still works. Attack! Yeah, it says 30 FPS, but it looks like 15 FPS. If you look at the animations, it's clearly not 30. So like in the previous game, I'd say you probably should use frame gen on this one. Again, I'm going to make a video about this soon. Did I hit my own Duh. Okay, no worries. But hey, there you go. 30 FPS and 15 on combat despite saying 30. So again, FrameGen would fix that issue. It's a turn-based game, you don't need reflexes there. Input lag is not a big deal in this particular case. But hey, it works. You just need to use the Steam key and the trackpad for some options, which is annoying, but not the end of the world. Final Fantasy X and X-2 HD Remaster, so you'll be greeted with this launcher once again, no gamepad support in the launcher. Hold the Steam key, right trackpad, and press on the trackpad to go to the options. Make sure it looks something like this. This is the highest it can go. Once you're into the game, hit the Steam key, go into control settings, and make sure one of the back buttons is mapped to escape, like I said in one of the previous games. So hit that button, go into system settings, video, and make sure it looks something like this. Usually anti-aliasing is on 8x, but I think it's kind of a waste of battery. It already looks pretty damn good. And it even has ambient occlusion, so they actually did put effort on this remaster. Let's continue. Right, so we're now into combat. Here it's actually 30 FPS in comparison to the previous ones. Again, I think this remaster actually had some extra effort into it. We got ambient occlusion, we got higher resolution textures, better models in some parts. And while it's locked at 30 FPS, FrameGen in this case will be a good idea. FrameGen will give you some input lag, but in a turn-based game, no big deal. You don't have to parry or anything like in Expedition 33. So yeah, not really a demanding game at all. It works just fine. The only downside is that 30 FPS. Comes to X-2, honestly, no problem at all. I'd say it feels less demanding than 10. It uses a little bit more GPU, but again, performance is solid 30 FPS, despite the extra effects on screen. So yeah, it does work. Just make sure to decrease the MSAA from 8x to 4x for battery life purposes, but otherwise, probably over 4 hours of battery, not really demanding at all. Play 10, X-2, any of the Final Fantasy X versions in this case, is completely fine. 30 FPS lock, use FrameGen for a smoother looking game with some input lag, but again, turn-based. Yeah, not much else to say, let's just jump into the next one. We're good. For Final Fantasy XII, once you launch the game, you'll be greeted with this launcher. You can use a controller for this one, thank God. Make sure you put this on high. Frame rate limits, let's put it at 60, that's the highest it goes. You can customize the controls as well, let's hit apply. With the high preset, you're going to notice that you're not hitting 6 FPS. In this case, I don't really care much. It's a turn-based game. You can do 60s if you want to, but you're basically walking around and actually doing turn-based combat as usual. So this one is Final Fantasy XII, the Zodiac Age. You might notice that on high I'm getting 100% GPU usage. Well, that's because this game actually allows you to go to 6 FPS, which is good to see. But being a turn-based game, I don't really think 60s 100% of the time is absolutely necessary. I'm just moving around here and there. Turn-based combat, dialogue. So I'm attacking, and I can move around and everything, but it's still turn-based. You just don't get into an arena like the previous games. In my opinion, not a big deal. So yeah, it works well, but it's significantly more demanding. Another way to get better performance, again, is medium settings. It still looks good, but you get a more consistent frame rate, at least when it comes to the town. And better battery life at the end of the day, which is what matters in a portable. So when you launch the game, you'll be greeted with this menu. You can tweak the shadow resolution as high or as low as you want. I think 2048 by 2048 is good enough. 4 times MSAA, 720p or 1080p. In this case, I recommend 1080p for super sampling. And if you don't want to change this again, check this box, do not show this window again. This game is pretty old at this point. Unfortunately, it's not perfect. If you're choosing 1080p like me, it's to basically lock it to 30 FPS. You can do 720 as well. But again, unfortunately, it doesn't run particularly great. There is a mod called FF13 Fix that I'm not showing you in this case because I want to make these videos as simple as possible, but the game doesn't correctly utilize all the threads, and honestly it doesn't work particularly great with the default settings. So my advice here is to lock it to 30 FPS so it's as consistent as possible, but if you use those fixes that are left in the description with a guide, you're basically going to get 60 FPS, which is way better when it comes to performance, but again it requires some work to get it done. Considering the size of this video, I'd rather just show you by default because I know most people are not going to go through the effort of installing the mod and all that. This should give you the best image quality possible with 1080p, downsampled to 720, so good anti-aliasing. But again, the game itself is going to be basically 30 FPS with a lot of stutters. So go into the Steam Deck's menu here, unlock it to 30. That should give you the best experience in general. So again, not perfect, but you're playing Final Fantasy XIII on the go, which I think is always good. I remember when this came out on the PlayStation 3, I was blown away with the graphics. And I can see that here as well. It still looks great, but it doesn't fully utilize the GPU either. So you'll need that FF13 fix, that mod, and disabling SMT using power tools. So again, it's not insanely difficult to do so. But again, most people are not going to do this. People that watch this video are probably not interested in tweaking any files or doing modding. But if you want to do so, again, there's a guide in the description, works fantastically well, and you can get 60 FPS at 720. So again, not a great PC port, especially considering this was originally a PlayStation 3 game, so I kind of understand why that would happen, but again, the game still looks pretty good in my opinion. And well, you have to deal with 30 FPS, unfortunately, which is not what I expected. I expected way more, but at least you'll get a very long battery life, probably over 4 hours easily. So yeah, you get into combat, turn-based, and if you're interested in modding it, you can get way better performance and lock it to 60 at 720. Lightning Returns, Final Fantasy XIII. I think this was one of the first Final Fantasies to come to PC, at least when it comes to the 3D ones. So in settings, just as before, on-screen button explanations, make sure it's on controller. And this one doesn't have any graphical options, it basically runs at 720 and that's it. I played this in 2015, here's my save file, holy hell. That's interesting. I love cloud saves. You can sometimes find saves from 10 years ago. Yep. I remember this being a terrible port because no graphical options. And you can see what happens with the frame rate as soon as I'm walking around here. So like in the previous game, Final Fantasy XIII, I highly recommend if you're not doing any mods to lock it to 30 FPS. So it's a little bit more consistent. But also there doesn't seem to be any particularly good anti-aliasing. Looks pretty chunky. But for the smaller screen, it works okay. I'm just disappointed with how poorly it runs when moving the camera. I'm pretty sure with that mod at disabling SMT should fix this one as well. And there's an issue with the game when you go to sleep mode, that there's audio crackling once you get back into the game. If you're playing the game and you go to sleep mode, which is a big deal for the Steam Deck, at least in my opinion is a great feature, you want to play the game properly once you do that. What I like about this one, actually, in comparison to the normal 13, is that it's not turn-based, you have more of a real-time combat. It reminds me a lot of Final Fantasy XV, actually, which 15 was actually a game that was going to be Final Fantasy XIII 2 or Versus, something like that. So as long as you're fine by playing at 30 FPS, you should be fine. It's okay. It works okay enough, in my opinion, but again, it wasn't a great PC port to begin with. This came out 10 years ago on PC, and was one of the first 3D Final Fantasy games from the PS3 era to actually land on PC. As soon as you launch Final Fantasy XIV online, hold the Steam key and use the trackpad to accept the terms, hit next. You're in the launcher for this online game. and you have to put your credentials, so Square Enix ID and the password. So make sure if you don't have one to register. I'm going to put my credentials, so once you open that with the Steam key and the trackpad, you can type it out with the on-screen keyboard. Alright, so once you log in with your credentials, you'll get to this other launcher, which you can move around using the Steam key and the trackpad, and you'll start downloading the actual game, which is 85 gigabytes. So yeah, let's wait for this to download. Hopefully you have enough space, and I'll see you in a bit. To go through the download and all that, you'll be into the game. I created my character, never played this one in the past, so apologize if I don't know something. First of all, hit the Steam key, controller settings, and like we did in other Final Fantasy games, map one of the buttons to escape. That allows you to go to this menu. So go to System Configuration and make sure, well, by default it was on High Laptop. That's what I kept. And this is basically what it does. Dynamic resolution, the threshold is 6 FPS. And the settings look something like this, basically. So yeah, everything looks something like that. And when it comes to display settings, I chose 800p on windowed mode. It works completely fine. The UI settings on 100%. And then, well, I'm keeping the refresh rate. And if the client is inactive, we're going to basically lock it to 30 FPS. Okay, so now I'm in an area with some NPCs and some players. I'm dropping into the mid 50s. No big deal, makes sense. Although if there's a lot more characters fighting and players, it's probably going to drop like a rock, which is pretty common in MMORPGs. So okay, I'm here. Okay, I'm here outside doing some very basic combat. I mean, I just started the game and I never played it before. But as soon as I saw players in my cone of vision, at least, yeah, in that sanctuary, it dropped into the 50s. So in big battles with lots more stuff going on, I'm pretty sure it's going to be pretty difficult for the Steam Deck. If you guys played this game on Steam Deck, please let me know what the experience is like. But as far as I remember, in other games that are MMORPGs, I'm usually pretty certain that it drops frames pretty hard. When there is a good amount of people fighting in a raid or something against multiple enemies, there's a lot of stuff going on, and the servers usually gets pretty slammed. So yeah, it works with a controller. The only disadvantage I would say on this one is just it's clearly meant for mouse and keyboard and you need an internet connection, but it works with a controller just fine. No issues whatsoever when it comes to that. But it just feels weird to play an MMORPG with a controller on a Steam Deck. So if you have a place to connect to the internet, I don't see why it wouldn't work. Seems to be okay. So yeah, please let me know if you play this on Steam Deck, what places can I check in the future to slam the performance out of it. Final Fantasy XV Windows Edition, this one is verified. By default it was at 720, but it's forced 16:9. When it comes to graphics, it was on the lowest settings, but I was able to crank it up a little bit higher and the game looks significantly better. So something like this. Let's get into the game. Alright, so I'm going to show you two places, the city and then some combat here and there. The main thing that I noticed on this one is stuttering. This has been an issue since the game came out and it's not 100% perfect when it comes to frame time stability. Apparently it's been improved for the Game Pass version on Windows, which I couldn't try personally, at least not yet, but on the Steam Deck that won't work unless you have Windows installed. So yeah, in the city it's okay, some hitching here and there, but other than that, we're usually pretty good, above 30 FPS with these settings. With the low preset, the game looks significantly worse, no ambient occlusion, worse shadows, worse raw distance in general. So personally I recommend playing on medium settings, like I'm doing right now, with native resolution. Because on low you cannot maintain 40s across the board, unfortunately. And now we're in the wilderness. Here you can notice the screen space reflections in all their glory. And we're heavily GPU bound over here. And there's still stuttering here and there, unfortunately. Again, this happened to me even on my PC when I played the game when it released. So yeah, some combat I think is fair to show. And it works pretty well. At least so far. And honestly, I'm just holding circle. It's not turn-based, but you don't have to have a lot of attention, in my opinion. When effects show up is when it likes dropping the most. But you can disable that field in order to make it more consistent, at least in combat. So my advice over here is to pause the game, open the Steam Deck menu, and lock it to 30 FPS. Right here. And that should give you the best experience. At least the most consistency, better said. Because otherwise you're going to notice the stutters way more. And you're going to get less battery life as well. What is funny about this game, it took forever to finish development. But at the same time, this was going to be like Final Fantasy XIII versus something like that. It was pretty interesting. And there it goes. You basically get 720p because black bars at the top and bottom of the screen. You lock it to 30 FPS to have decent visuals, and by decent visuals I mean the ambient occlusion, the draw distance, the reflections on the water. You can disable depth of field if you want a bit better performance when in combat, but overall it's been completely fine. Just those stutters that are pretty annoying, but as time went on they stopped happening as often. Maybe it's a shader cache issue, I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, you can actually play Final Fantasy XV on the go with decent visuals. And if you don't like the TAA, you can use SMAA. The edges are pretty chunky. Reminds me a lot of newer games that have that issue, unfortunately. Yeah, the game looks pretty decent and it runs better than I expected, personally. Especially after seeing how demanding it was when it came out. So yeah, let's jump into the next one. When it comes to Final Fantasy XVI, well, I'm using the lowest settings at 800p. With performance upscaling, this means 50% resolution, internally 400p, which is pretty low with VRS enabled. So this game got a few updates, but that's still not enough to maintain it at 30 FPS on Steam Deck. Again, this game is super demanding, even on higher end computers. This is not Unreal Engine, nor the Luminous engine of Final Fantasy XV. This is another in-house engine that they built, as far as I know. So it's not perfect, especially in cutscenes. We're super GPU limited. We're also memory limited as well. VRAM is basically at 6.6 and RAM at 11.2. So we're using all the physical memory on the Steam Deck, which makes sense. I mean, considering how it runs on PC, it makes complete sense, at least in my opinion. It's usually running better indoors. As soon as you get into any visually intensive combat, it's going to drop below 30 once again, especially with those volumetric effects going on. Not surprising. And in cutscenes it always drops below 24, so you're kind of screwed there. Would I recommend this on Steam Deck? Definitely not. This one, well, you can also enable frame gen or something like that to make it look smoother. It's not really all that smooth, I'd say, especially again when you're doing more effect heavy combat like I'm doing right now. And it gets even more complex as the game advances. There's bigger enemies that's going to have more effects on screen. Everyone's dead. So in that regard, personally I don't think it's good enough, the performance, to play this on Steam Deck. You can enable frame gen inside the game or using lossless scaling. But again, that adds input lag. And you're not actually getting a higher frame rates, you're actually just adding a fake frame in between each frame, which, I mean, is good, it looks okay, but when you're interacting with the game, you're going to notice the input lag. It's pretty obvious. And here, there's a few enemies and I'm outside. It just completely dies. So personally, I think we shouldn't be playing this on Steam Deck. Just personal preference, of course. There's also a demo that you can try if you're interested to try it by yourself. So yeah, that's Final Fantasy XVI. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. This one, 720, doesn't have 16:10. Medium textures, medium shadows, high anti-aliasing. You can put this, yeah, on high is fine. It's TAA. So here we go. This is the game. As far as I know, when you choose 6 FPS, like in Final Fantasy VII Remake, you're actually getting forced dynamic resolution to hit 6 FPS, but I think it looks pretty good, all things considered. Combat feels fluid, and yeah, I think it works completely fine. There's probably going to be more demanding places later, but overall, it's pretty easy to run, pretty damn well. Even with the bigger enemy, we're going to go a little bit more ahead to see a different location, but overall, seems to be 50 to 60 most of the time. So yeah, it seems to be way less demanding than the full-fat Final Fantasy VII Remake, which makes sense, smaller scope for this one. So yep, I highly recommend it if you never played it. Combat feels very smooth, and not much more to say. It's fine on Steam Deck. Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate, so this one, UE4, 720p, low shadows, low textures, 4 characters displayed, and I have an entire video dedicated to this game if you want to see the explanation. But in that video that I'm talking about, I actually show multiple settings, multiple performance targets, and more places, not only the city, which is the beginning of the game. I also show the slums and some other places with more effects on screen, which I think is way more understandable than this quick look. But in my opinion, again, lock it to 45 if you have an OLED Steam Deck. If you have an LCD Steam Deck, locking it to 40 should be okay as well. While 60s can happen with heavy dynamic resolution, it destroys the visuals of the game, which again is, considering how good it looks, I think sacrificing the resolution that much doesn't make a lot of sense. There's also black bars at the top and bottom of the screen, which is forced 16:9, like many others in the franchise. Which sucks in my opinion, but hey, it is what it is. There's probably a mod for 16:10, but I always try to show out-of-the-box performance and the experience. But this one works completely fine, looks okay considering its low settings. The shadows still look great, I mean, come on. They didn't put a lot of effort in the options menu. It's like 2 options and good luck. So yeah, it works. And I'd say it's a great way to play the game nowadays. Despite this being weaker than a PS4, I think it does a great job. I mean, this game on the go, I wouldn't have thought about it, yeah, a few years ago. Kinda crazy. The future is crazy. Finally, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, 720p because 16:10 doesn't exist, 66% maximum and minimum resolution, and basically everything on the absolute lowest settings. For image clarity, TAAU is highly recommended over TAA. And we're going to start with uncapped frame rates. So when you're going on the back of a chocobo, it tends to drop frames pretty hard, especially in more clogged environments, to say it in some way. But I played this on day 1 and honestly hasn't changed much when it comes to performance, maybe 1 or 2 frames ahead. But this is very heavily modified UE4, and wow, the things that they cut down for this to work on Steam Deck were especially the draw distance and very heavy hit to the resolution. As you can probably notice, it's very grainy. Well, we're playing on a Steam Deck on a game that's difficult to run even on a PS5. I'm happy that they know that the Steam Deck exists. Yeah, the game does work and whatever, but if you played it on anything that is not a Steam Deck, maybe, I don't know, a PS5, a higher-end PC, or maybe on the cloud, see what I did there? You're going to notice that this is a huge downgrade, obviously. But so I'm not saying it's unplayable, just that it's a very compromised when it comes to the experience. On the smaller screen, it's less noticeable that you have a super low resolution, but you can still see it. I mean, let's be honest here. Especially the draw distance, you'll notice objects popping in and out very quickly. This distance, we're already losing basically all the detail. It's now an hexagon instead of a pipe in the middle of the screen. So yeah, it's very aggressive draw distance, super aggressive, which again makes sense considering the performance implications. But at the same time, I don't know, not sure if it's worth sacrificing all that just to play this game. It all depends on you. What I'm trying to say is you'll find a very grainy game with a lot of spikes in the frame time, with drops into the upper 20s, especially when traversing in the open world. A lot of pop-in, and well, you can see that Cloud's face is a few pixels wide. But if you don't care about that and want to just play the game, I don't see a reason not to play it. It's all up to you at that point. But again, those are sacrifices that need to be made for this game to work on Steam Deck. Personally, I wouldn't play it like this because I have other ways to do it. I'd rather honestly play Final Fantasy VII Remake over this one, at least on Steam Deck, and then play the other one either on a console, on a higher end PC, or even on the cloud. That's the entire Final Fantasy franchise on Steam Deck. What are my thoughts? Well, it went better than I expected. Obviously, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is super taxing, even on current gen consoles and PC, so I'm not surprised on the performance on Steam Deck. I'm happy that they put a Steam Deck preset, but honestly I think it drops a little bit too low, all things considered. So you can play it, but it's a very compromised experience. Obviously, it's a new game on a handheld, so kinda makes sense. When it comes to the other Final Fantasy games, the older ones, many of them are 4:3 aspect ratio, which kinda sucks in my opinion, but it's older games. Same with the performance. Many of them before, I think it was Final Fantasy X, are locked to 15 FPS in combat and then locked to 30 outside. That's a limitation of the animations and how they were built back then. Personally, that doesn't bother me, but if it bothers you, you can use FrameGen with lossless scaling. I'm going to make a video later about it. I'll leave it in the description once that's done. So you can frame generate from 15 to 30 FPS, so it looks smoother and the input lag doesn't really matter because it's a turn-based game. Then when it comes to newer games, the Final Fantasy XIII PC port has always been pretty bad. There are mods to improve on it, but without mods, just lock it to 30 and enjoy the game. With mods, you can probably hit 60s without much of an issue, which is good to see. You can also play Final Fantasy XI if you want to. It's not available in my region, so I skipped it, but that one and 14, that are online games, they work completely fine. 14 also has a good controller profile, at least in my opinion. It just feels weird to play an MMO with a controller, but it kinda works. Then when it comes to Final Fantasy XV, 7 Remake and the previous ones, they're usually completely fine, excepting again 13 because PC port stuff. I would say out of all of them, the ones that I would avoid on Steam Deck are Rebirth, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Final Fantasy XVI. That one drops like a rock when it comes to performance. And Rebirth is just too compromised, but if it's your only platform, okay, fine, you can try it if you want to. But you have to sacrifice a lot when it comes to 7 Rebirth. And at some point, it doesn't feel like a finished game, especially with that limited draw distance. But outside of those games, I'm pretty impressed on how the entire franchise works on Steam Deck. I tried to cover all of them, but some of them were not in my library, other ones were harder to get. So I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did taking a look at it. It took forever to build, so thank you for watching, and I'll see ya next time. Bye guys!